Three, two. We are now live. Ladies and
Woohoo!
gentlemen, we are now live. And today I am so excited because today I am talking to none other than Tanisha Laverne Grant, Hollywood red carpet entertainment journalist extraordinaire. And ladies and
Mm.
gentlemen, this young lady has talked to some of the most iconic people in the film industry. She has talked with Oprah Winfrey. Yes, that Oprah Winfrey, Samuel L. Jackson, the incomparable Patti LaBelle, Philadelphia's own. She's also spoken with the absolutely amazing Spike Lee, Melvin Van Peebles, Forrest
Woo.
Whitaker, Lawrence Fishburne, Katie Lang, Cicely Tyson. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And one of my absolute favorites, Congresswoman Maxine Waters. So to
Ah,
say that this lady has a pedigree is an absolute understatement. So it is an absolute honor to again welcome Tanisha Laverne Grant to a conversation with. And just a side note, you and my niece share a name, so I was really excited about that. My niece's name is Tanisha.
oh wow. How does she pronounce hers? Tanisha or Tanisha?
She pronounced it Tanisha, and you know what? I should have asked you before I pronounced your name. Is it Tanisha or Tanisha?
I pronounce it Tanisha. I prefer
Okay.
Tanisha.
Okay, then we are going to go with so Tanisha Laverne Grant, red
Yes.
carpet entertainment journalist extraordinaire. Welcome
Yes.
to a conversation with. I am so happy to be sitting down talking with you. How are you?
I am fantastic on this beautiful Los Angeles afternoon. We had a bit of a fire drill here in my building earlier today that kept
Okay.
going on and on. So I'm like, oh my God, I have a 3 o'clock. I have a 3 o'clock. But I'm so happy to be here with you. It's always an honor to sit with fellow storytellers to talk about the landscape and the backstory and how we create a path going forward with new technology.
Great. So I always like to ask, how did all of this begin? Let's go back because we are from the same area. I grew up in Philadelphia, born
Okay.
and raised North Philadelphia. You're a native of Chester, so you're right down,
Yep.
95. So
Yep.
how did you get started in the business?
I got started as, just a young kid, a little girl. My parents were really big about education. They were young parents who, brought me into the world when they were only 18 years old, 1 month after they graduated from high school in 1973. So their biggest goal was to not have their children repeat some of their missteps, right? And so the biggest goal for them was education over everything. So every writing contest they could get me to sign up for, they signed me up for it. It was all about reading, writing, and watching. And I said that the other day in a small clip that it's really important for storytellers to read as much as you can. My parents were always dropping books in my lap. There was no such thing as boredom. Oh, you're bored? Oh, okay. Well, learn this speech by Marcus Garvey. Oh, you're bored? Well, you know what? Here's Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver. Oh, you're bored? Here's Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, right? Here's a whole stack of books by J. California Cooper. So my parents were really, really big on education. And so by the time I was in high school at Chester High School, and that's after I had transferred. I was a student. Let me just back it up a little bit. My parents divorced, and my mother decided to move her and the children to Hendersonville, North Carolina. And I was a student at Hendersonville High School, and I was on a struggle bus a little bit because those kids were so far advanced, and I struggled to like catch up. And so once I finally caught up, I realized how Black school districts were failing Black and brown students like myself. So then when I transferred to Chester High, because now is my father's leg, to raise the children. And now I'm, 14 or 15 years old when my father has full custody of me and my sister, who was about around 11. And when I got to Chester High, I was bored in the classroom. because the education that I was getting from Hendersonville High School in North Carolina was so accelerated. So it was at that time my dad was like, okay, we have to really get this kid immersed in other activities outside of Chester High School. And I was the editor in chief of the high school newspaper called The Welcome, at Chester High School. The advisor, Mr. Grimaldi was his name. He said, you'd be great as an editor in chief. So I was to take up that mantle my senior year, and to get me prepared for that in my 11th grade year, there was an opportunity for me to participate in what was called the KYW News Studies program, right there on Independence Mall. And it was, it changed my life. In order to participate in the News Studies program, you had to write a series of essays. You were competing against students from other school districts. I was competing against high school students from like Strathaven, Cardinal O'Hara, Penncrest, Penwood, like all these other schools in and around the Delaware Valley. And of course, the Philadelphia school districts as well. So, it had to be over 300 applicants, and I was not very hopeful that I would get in. And, my father taught me the level of optimism, how important it is to be optimistic about everything, how important it is to be prepared, right? And so, lo and behold, I got in. I was selected. There were 2 students from Chester High who got in, and I was one of them. And it was a 15-week program on the weekends. I commuted from Chester, so I had my suit on, my little attaché case. My father gave me car fare or bus fare or train fare, to commute from Chester. I took the R2 down to Independence Mall East. And at 15, 16 years old, you couldn't tell me anything. I was like, oh my God, this is the path forward. And so here I am in the newsroom at KYW3, learning the nuts and bolts of storytelling and curating story and presenting it in real time. So that was the beginnings of building my career. I would then, graduate high school. I went on to Edinburgh University, had some trauma at Edinburgh. My dad said, okay, we're going to Cheney, and that was my dad's path. He went to Edinburgh first because he had a young family with myself and my mom, followed by my sister, who was born in 1977. He said, okay, I'm going to marry the mother of my children, which means I have to leave Edinburgh. And so he attended Cheney. So when he got my grades from Edinburgh, he couldn't understand why my GPA was so low. I was sexually assaulted at Edinburgh, and I never told my father about it. So he just couldn't wrap his mind around like what happened to his kid and why my GPA was so low. And my dad passed in 2021, not knowing what that sticking point was for me at Edinburgh. I could just never bring myself to tell him. But all he knew was, I'm going to make sure my kid has a thorough education, like my children will at the very least have a bachelor's degree. So he said, you know what, I'm taking you to Cheney. He walked me into the president's office. It was the spring of 1992. And the rest is history. The president was like, don't worry about a thing. She's in great hands. I got my roster. And I was now a communication arts major at Cheney University of Pennsylvania, the nation's oldest HBCU, founded in 1837. And I flourished at Cheney. Cheney owes me nothing. The HBCU experience is bar none. Yeah. So now that I'm a student at Cheney, the next year and a half, I decided to run for Miss Cheney University of Pennsylvania. I won. And, again, like this path is happening. One of my advisors and deans, the Dr. Late Leatrice Bennett, and Dr. Edith Scott Bagley. Dr. Edith Scott Bagley is the sister of Coretta Scott King, sister-in-law to the late, great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So these two women are my professors at Cheney. Dr. Leatrice Bennett was the dean of the communication arts department. I had several of her classes, including an English class and an African American literature class. And she pulled me aside one day. She said, I need you to come to my office. So I go to her office and I'm like, oh my God, like what does
what did I do?
What is this? Like, why am I going to see Dr. Bennett? Mm-hmm. And, she was a very regal woman. I mean, you could just smell her elegance just coming up the hallway, just kente cloth and cloaks and beautiful silver locks and head wraps and earrings and just all of the majestic that, a 21-year-old could muster. It's like, I couldn't imagine someone who was this regal wanting to see me one-on-one. So I go to her office and she says, listen, I think it's time for you to do an internship. And there's an opportunity at WCAU. It was CBS at the time. This was right when they were making the switch. She said, there's a great opportunity for you to be an internship, to be an intern at WCAU CBS. So I was just like, okay, like, all right, if you say that that's what I'm ready for, albeit I didn't think I was, but if you say, Dr. Bennett, that I'm ready to take up this charge, then so be it. And so now I'm entering the corporate news structure, and it's 1994, and it's really important to think about the zeitgeist of the culture and everything that was happening in 1994, right? So there's a big lens on Los Angeles around that time with the beating of Rodney King. Yes. The O.J. Simpson trial is coming too, right? So I'm entering the newsroom around that time. Philadelphia is the fourth largest market in the television news industry. And so here I am, 20 years old, 21, I think. I'm the newly minted Miss Cheney University of Pennsylvania. And now I'm commuting every day from campus, to City Line Avenue and Monument Road, which was like an hour and a half commute. And I did it with enthusiasm. I didn't get paid.
Right.
And I did this internship. It was only supposed to be for a semester. I worked my internship as if I was getting paid $250,000 a year. I worked my internship with a level of education, dedication, enthusiasm that is unrivaled, and so the powers that be at NBC let me kind of ride under the radar because my internship went on for about a year and some change. And then I was offered a full-time position as a production assistant and assignment editor. So I was there. I was at NBC for about 5 years, from the time I was like 20, 21. And I stayed until, like 1998, right when I decided to move to Los Angeles. So about 4 years, four and a half years. And so that was how my career in, journalism began.
Wow. So I want to go way back to when it was suggested to you that you should go into the KYW program in high school, and you said, I don't know. But your dad basically told you, you never know. Why don't you just give it a try and write your best?
Right.
So you end up doing that. You end up getting in. Fast forward, you're now interning at the news station, and you're giving it your absolute best. So my question to you is, did that particular incident, was that one of the things that kind of laid the foundation for the level of excellence that you showed once you got to the news station? Because your dad was like, just write your best. So let's translate that into do your best. So was that one of the characters that actually had you working as if you were making $250,000 a year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Indigenous people, Black and brown people, we are already operating in what appears like light years away. Right? There's this black and brown experience is trauma based for a lot of us, and we try our best to move through it. So my environment lacked a lot of opportunity. Coming from Chester, PA, we didn't even have our own grocery store when I was a young girl growing up in Chester. We had to go to Pathmark or Giant I think is what it is now. But it was in Brookhaven. It was not in our city. There was one small little store where people would go to get frozen food called Murray's.
Yes.
There was a fresh market called Yanks. But there was no full out grocery store. There was no movie theater. In order to see a movie, you had to go to Glen and Run Mall or Springfield Mall. So on top of the pressure that I felt as just being a Black woman, there's this pressure for me to want to succeed and excel for my community, for my age mates, right? So there was just all this pressure. So it's like, oh, I got to get this done, by hook or crook. I have to get this done, period. I mean, I can remember there were times where I didn't have bus fare, and I told the 120 bus driver, like, well, in a very cheeky way, in a very I'm going to my internship. Like, I don't have my money today, but I'm going to my internship. So let me on the bus, and I had this community around me. I have this little gift of allowing people to be a part of my story. The collective work. Like you, Mr. Bus Driver, I need you. I'm 20 years old. All I have is this internship. It's not paid. I get a stipend from my dad. I have to stretch this. So you too will be a part of my success story. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what's so interesting? I am retiring from SEPTA next year.
Oh my goodness.
31 years so far. Yeah.
Man, I can't tell you the bus drivers on the 120 and the number 44 who saw me to City Line Avenue and Monument Road for 4 years.
And I used to drive to 44. So you know what? I may have been one of those drivers. I may have been one of those drivers that was actually, because when you were saying City and Monument Road, because I drive to 38 now. And the 38 goes, it's right there. So when you're talking, well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not familiar with Philadelphia, they have certain bus routes. So we're talking Philly right now. But yes, I drove the 44 for years. So more than likely, I picked you up and took you to that news station right there at City and Monument Avenue. Yes. Yeah, because I started at SEPTA in 1993. I started at SEPTA in 1993.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. That's so crazy. That is very real.
Yeah.
Because I interned from 1994, December 1994, and then I left, as an employee. It was the summer. It was like summer 1998. Because I moved to Los Angeles Labor Day in 1998. So for those 4 years.
I am more than sure that I picked you up on my bus. And you know what? The interesting thing about that is it's so surreal. You never know who you're going to come into contact with. And you never know the impact that you're going to have on them, because just that driver allowing you to get on the bus without paying has you sitting right here. And oftentimes people think that the gesture has to be huge. No. And all it takes sometimes is him saying, you know what, girl, go ahead, sit down.
Yep, exactly. And it wasn't something that I abused. It was just like, oh my God, like I don't have it today. Like, I'm going to my internship. Like, please, and then the next day I'd be like, here's a donut, here's a coffee.
And
He'd be like, oh my God, thank you. I didn't have time to get a coffee and a donut.
And trust me, Laverne, we appreciate that. We truly
man.
do, because it's a very hard job. It's a very hard job. And what you were, I want to get a little bussy right now, but what you were was what we call a regular passenger. Because if you see the same driver over a certain length of time, that's called I'm what's called a regular bus driver. So the route that you would see him on all the time, that was the route that he picked. That was his regular route. So he was the regular bus driver. So you guys are regular passengers. So of course, if I see you, I'm going to look out for you. If Laverne is supposed to get to the corner at 6:30,
oh my God, it was a lot of that.
Yeah.
Oh my
God. I'm gonna look for you because I know you're coming. So I know you're coming out the building. I'm looking for you coming out the building because I know you got to catch that 120 to get back to where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was a lot of hoofing. Oh my God, and like waving, like I see you, girl.
Of course.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Oh wow! I haven't spoken about that in years.
Small world.
Floyd, you're not gonna have me crying my lashes off.
Yeah. But that's amazing. And interestingly enough, I know he would be tickled pink if he could see you now. If he could see you now, and see, that's amazing because he could say, "Wow, I had a hand in that."
Big time.
which is absolutely amazing. But I have a question. You said you were Miss Cheney, and then Miss Pennsylvania. How did you get into pageantry? How did that happen?
I'm definitely a girly girl. Mm-hmm. I love fashion, glam, entertainment, fur, sequin, beading, silver, gold, mesh, all things divine feminine, all things glamour, all things that allow a woman to feel her sensuality and her sexuality in a very elegant and elevated way. Ever since I was a little girl, I remember visiting my grandmother, Rose, in the Bennett Homes projects. And she had pillows, some of them would be satin, some of them would, have a fur texture, so I'm really big on textures. And, I just remember we've taken our environment, right? Like everything that we see from the time we're coming out of the womb has an imprint on us, and so I remember watching Diana Ross in Mahogany, Diane Carroll on Dynasty, all these women. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how do I get there? There were pageants that were happening in my community of Chester, PA. But for whatever reasons, my parents were like, I don't think that's the route. I don't think that's the pageant route for you. I would rather you just focus on your studies and we'll find some other opportunities later on down the line. So by the time I'm in my 20s, there's this young, beautiful actress who's cutting her teeth in Hollywood by the name of Halle Berry. Mm. It's 1994. I'm on winter break and I'm back at my grandmother Rose's house in the Bennett Homes projects. And I'm there because I'm also healing because my boyfriend was murdered. Mm-hmm. Yes, he was 22 years old. I was 20 years old. And he was murdered in the vestibule of his parents' house in Winfield. So I went to my grandmother's house for healing and care and restoration. So it was during that time, it was December, January of like 1994, 1993 or 1994. It was 1993, actually, now that I think about it. Halle Berry is on Arsenio Hall. You know, they're both from Cleveland. And he is asking her about her life and career and, you know, what was the impetus and, you know, all these things. And she said, you know, I want to thank my pageant support system. You know, I did pageants, I was Miss Ohio, and like bloop, I was brought back to wanting to do pageants, the same pageants that I wanted to do when I was a little girl and teenager, that my parents were like, oh, we're gonna pump the brakes on that. Because my parents looked at pageantry as just, you know, a space where girls were coming of age too swiftly. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like prancing around in my house that's not what you're gonna do. That's not what you're gonna do. You're gonna focus on writing and reading, speaking, presenting. You know, like that's what we're gonna focus on. Like prancing around in a dress on stage, you know, in a swimsuit, and no. So now I'm a student at Cheney University, and I say in that moment, I said, oh my goodness, I'm running for Miss Cheney. That's what I'm doing. You know, and I didn't need permission from my parents to do that. Mm-hmm. And because my dad was also a very proud Cheney alum, he understood the significance of being Miss Cheney University. So now he was just like, okay, let's plug into that. Mm-hmm. And so that is how I started my pageant experiences, was deciding, okay, here's an opportunity. Here is where I'm going to meet the moment of something that has been inside of me since I was, you know, watching, you know, pageants on television. And then that summer, I happened to be home with my father in Brookhaven, adjacent to Chester. At that time, we lived at Bridgewater Apartments, right near Trimble Run and Albert Road. So I'm watching the Miss Collegiate African American pageant. And there were these beautiful women coming on the screen from all the HBCUs. You know, they had whittled the number down to like 50 participants. And back then, this is like, you know, the late 80s and 90s, there were over 150 historical Black colleges and universities. But they got the number down to about like 50 women, you know, from Cheney, Spelman, Howard, Tougaloo, Fort Valley State, FAMU. I'm like, whoa, what is happening here? Hampton. And there are three women who really stick out to me. One is Michelle Cato. I don't even remember which school Michelle represented, but she got up on that stage, and the way she introduced herself, like, I am Michelle Cato, you know, I will overcome, you know, I represent yada, 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 HBCU founded in whatever year, and the poise and the elegance and the deliverance, the cadence. I'm like, oh my God, I want to be like Michelle Cato. You know, another one, Rosalind White, who was Miss Howard University. Rosalind, a Broadway diva, you know, she just wrapped up, I think she was portraying like Billie Holiday. Oh my God, I'm having a mind flub. But Rosalind, I just spoke with Rosalind a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I just messaged Rosalind like yesterday or the day before. Miss Howard University, you know, and then of course there was Vanessa Williams, who, you know, had her crown taken away, which is crazy when you think about the climate context that we live in now.
Yes.
You know, so those are three women that definitely inspired me to, well, and Halle Berry, but just in terms of running for like Miss Cheney, I'm like, oh my God, this is very real. And the beauty of Michelle Cato and Rosalind White was that they were beautiful, deep toned women, you know, They weren't fair. They weren't passe blanc. They were beautiful Godiva chocolate women. Oh, and they were just so breathtaking.
Mm.
I said, oh my goodness. I mean, I just couldn't get enough of those two. And I somehow, like my grandmother Rose, may she rest in peace, somehow got, tapes of it. I don't know if she taped the pageants, but I ran them tapes till they popped because I'm like, I have this level of excellence. I mean, the way those women just together, they were definitely well-read coming out of Howard. They were definitely well-spoken coming out of Cheney. They were definitely well-spoken coming out of FAMU. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is what I'm doing. So I remember telling my dad over pancakes and sausage at Tom Jones restaurant on Edgemont Avenue with my sister that I was running for Miss Cheney, and I had their full support. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget the look on my dad's face during that entire night of the pageant. He sat front row and just mouthed with me, where he thought I was going to flub a line, like he would go like this, like, stand up straight, pull up, meaning like speak from your stomach, don't speak from here, speak from here, project. I mean, he was like a backstage, dad. Mm-hmm. He got it done. He did all that he could to make sure me and my sister would have certain opportunities. And the look on his face when I won is one that I'll never forget. I will never, ever forget the look on my father's face when I won, because it was as if he won too.
Mm-hmm. Well, he did.
Father.
He did.
Father.
Yeah. Yeah. And being a proud dad of two amazing young women myself, I understand that feeling because, dads have a special bond with their daughters. I have two. Wow. They're both adults. But, they will always be your babies. And, he was looking at such a proud moment for his baby.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. But you spoke of their regalness. And when I look at you online, your pictures, the way you take pictures and the way you present, there's such a regalness about you. There's such a level of elegance. They know when you are in a room. They know when you're in a room.
Thank you.
Did that have anything to do with your persona now, watching those women just really be so elegant and so self-assured, and you're looking at them saying, hey, you know what? I have that in me. I can do that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is what my parents were doing from the time I was, a little girl, mm-hmm. With the Easter outfits, the dresses that came with the cloaks, the shoes, the bags, the speak when spoken to, repeat the question when somebody asks you something and then you answer it, pay attention, watch your environment, listen, eat different foods. Don't be so quick to dismiss somebody else's experience because you haven't had it. There are just all these things that are being imprinted upon me. And when you're a teenager and you're being browbeat by your father to like, be this, be that, you're like, oh God, this brother just will not let up. But then as you're maturing and getting older, you're seeing other women exemplify everything. I'm seeing other women exemplify everything that my father was pouring into me. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right.
I get it.
This is what the yield is. Okay. This is what that result is. So, yeah, it was definitely, I grew up in an environment where, my parents were definitely afraid of me being a teenage mother. Definitely. I love boys. At this age, I love men. You know what I mean? So they were like, "Oh, we got a live one over here. Like we gotta pull her in." And so, yeah, it was like, okay, we have to make sure she is not around other girls who are displaying, a level of promiscuity.
Fast.
Yeah, right. So they were very deliberate about that. It bothered me when they would say, "Oh, well, I just don't want you around such and such."
Mhm.
You know, um, yeah, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. But
Yeah.
back then, I was just like, wow,
Yeah.
and it was my early understanding of how culture works, even today. How we can be so selective in the gatekeeping because we think a person doesn't fit into our vision and our brand, or our corporate structure. And so we're going to box them out. I began to understand it like back then. I was like, oh, so we all have to play a role if we want to be accepted in certain spaces. We all have to have a mask on, and that's how the mask gets really tight. Pardon me, the mask gets really tight, and then you find yourself popping out of the mask, trying to figure out who are you authentically.
Mhm.
All because, especially as a Black woman, Black women don't have the luxury, to experience all the things that we would like to or need to in effort to be our full and authentic selves.
Yeah. And you know what? You're kind of seeing that. I'm not going to really go too deep in this, but you're kind of seeing that in some of the comments directed at the first Black woman nominee for the president of the United States. You're kind of seeing how they're trying to box her into an extremely
Mm,
small box. And it is so interesting. As long as you act a certain way and play a certain role, you're fine.
yep.
But as soon as you decide, well, this is not for me and I'm so much more than that, now you are a problem. So I want to talk to you about that because again, following you online, when you show up on a red carpet, you show up.
Mm.
So over the years with you covering the red carpet, how have you navigated that when people try to put Tanisha Laverne Grant in that very small box? How have you navigated that?
It's challenging to say the least, right? Especially in my efforts to be a part of mainstream storytelling, mainstream media outlets. Um, I had a situation back in 2020 where a producer from ABC came over to me and said, I would love for you to be a part of, our programming. You could come on as a contributor. And she had been seeing, would see each other over the years. Like I started covering the Oscars, I want to say around 2015. 2018 was the first time I said, okay, I'm going to make this an event. And I'm going to start like getting dressed and just doing the whole thing. So that was 2018. So I see her 2 years later. It's 2020. And I'm wearing this beautiful gold dress by a designer named Milan Bruton. It had all these beautiful dragons on it. And I'm backstage at the Oscars. And I'm just kind of sitting there looking over my notes. The gown is like huge. And we strike up a conversation. I mean, that's what we do at these events. We're always looking for our next opportunity. We're always looking to build bridge. We're always looking for community. And so this producer says, you'd be great for our outlet. She introduced me to another producer who was there. We all exchanged numbers. And the pandemic happened. Like a few weeks later, now we're in the pandemic. So the pandemic's happening, I'm pitching her and she's just like, oh, we don't have space. We don't have space. I get it. It's all about COVID. We're in the middle of a global health crisis. So, I just backed off. I reached out a couple times in 2021, pitched her. Nothing's happening. 2022, pitched her. Nothing's happening. 2023, pitched her. Nothing's happening. 2024, I DM'd her and it was just like, hey, can we have a conversation? And I will bet everything I own that it has something to do with how I present on social media that she believes does not fall in line and philosophy and constitution with the ABC brand. Mm-hmm. And so that's something very real, right? And so some people might look at that and be like, oh, you messed up by the way you're presenting, yada, yada, yada. But that just may not be the house for me, right? Because if we talk about, being a woman and being sensual and feminine and speaking truth to power, Me Too, all these things. But then when it shows up, when I show up saying I'm in my bathing suit and I'm on my rooftop and I'm in water and I'm enjoying this afternoon, then now you are projecting your ideas of what my body type is associated with. Because if I were a skinny white woman, then it just, there's no issue there. And then she can still go and report the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news. But because I look a certain way, you are projecting, right, a very oppressive idea of what this body type means and how it's translating to you. It could be a stretch, but for someone who is so enthusiastic about bringing me into the ABC network, and then year after year after year after year, I'm following up and nothing is happening, I can only attribute that to, okay, they don't like the way that I am representing myself on social media. And that is very real. Mm-hmm. That is very real, and I take it on the chin and I keep it pushing. But it's not lost on me. I can't pretend that, I wonder what that is about. Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Interestingly enough, with that, when you start to feed into that, and then you start to conform, you diminish yourself. And what ends up happening is the person that was interested in you for a particular thing, they're no longer interested because you're not the person they were interested in. You become a shell of that. You were interested in me because of this.
Right.
But now you're trying to whittle me down and you're saying, well, Tanisha, what's the problem? What happened? Well, I'm trying to fit into that little thing you got me boxed in and it's not working out. And now I'm the problem. Where if you had just let me shown up as my big dress dragon wearing self, then it's not an issue. And it's so funny that people actually do that. They'll tap you for a thing, but then the very thing that they tap you for, they try to tamp down. And sometimes it's because your light is so big that it threatens them. It's not even your issue. It's their issue, which is interesting.
Pardon me.
No.
Okay. I just want to make sure my battery says it's low. I don't know what happened here.
Oh no, we can't have that, ladies and gentlemen, because I got like
I'm plugged in. Yeah, I'm plugged in. Hopefully we'll be fine.
But you look good. It still looks, you haven't yet. It hasn't gone. You haven't gone anywhere yet. So but let's talk about the people that you've interviewed, because you've interviewed some absolutely amazing people, and I just wanted to talk to you about the preparation that goes into that when you're going to be talking with a Samuel L. Jackson online or an Oprah Winfrey, people of that caliber. What is the preparation for you like when you're going to be interviewing people such as that?
The preparation is life, right? There's a research and development is just living. Right. So anyone is alive can already kind of run off the load the things that Samuel Jackson has accomplished. We can run off the load the things that Oprah Winfrey has accomplished. So again, it just goes back to allowing yourself, right, to plug into your profession as a lived experience. You know, so I'm reading all the time. I'm writing as much as I can. I'm watching as much film and television as I can. I'm looking at the work of Alfred Hitchcock. I know that he was in his 50s when he made Birds. How inspirational, right? In a culture that always celebrates 40 under 40, 30 under 30, top 10 under 20. You know what I mean? So there are just all these things that are just a part of my everyday lexicon that whenever I'm on the carpet, I could plug into. Now, and of course, there's the research and development for the actual film title, right? Samuel Jackson now has a film coming out called Megapolis or Metropolis or something like that. So, of course, now I'm going to go down the rabbit hole, and look up some recent interviews that Samuel Jackson did. I mean, that Lawrence Fishburne did, which is why I found it so fascinating when I saw the interview that he did with Jamel Hill. And he was talking about how he really was not completely 1000% sold on What's Love Got to Do with It, because Ike was not, a super fleshed out, developed character, but he wanted to be there for Angela Bassett, who at the time was an ingenue. So like having that bit of information. So next week, if I happen to be on a interview with Lawrence Fishburne, I'm like, oh, I saw your interview via the podcast of Floyd Marshall and Jamel Hill, that you had a little bit of reluctance about What's Love Got to Do with It. Can you talk a little bit about that and how actors can advocate for themselves in the storytelling process? And that's a lived experience question. Because I'm watching Floyd, let me see. Oh, okay. Oh, that's Jamel Hill. Oh, Lawrence Fishburne. Oh, I may see him next week. So now it's banked, But the other part is just doing the research and development for the title project that the actor, writer, producer is promoting during a particular press run. And I tell journalists all the time, it's really important to have at least 3 to 5 questions ready. The carpet moves really fast. So you definitely want to ask, I like to ask, what did your character teach you about yourself? That's just one of my favorite questions to ask, because each character, I would imagine, would bring something different to your human experience, either allowing you to plug into something or allowing you to say, you know what, I need to plug out of this. So that's one of the questions that I really, really love to ask. Or, did you have a long time decompressing out of the character? How long did it take you to shed the skin of, this particular character, especially when the character was so dark? You know what I mean? Like those are like default questions that I like to have. Or, I like to start out, congratulations. It's nice to share in this moment with you. I've been on this awards tour, this awards run with you for the entire season. Or, oh my God, I remember when you were 15 and I interviewed you and now you're 20 and here we are. So I try to make it very personal. I like for the little 12 inches of space that I get on a red carpet to be a very self space. I'm not a gotcha type of storyteller. It's like I just want to make sure that you are safe and well and know that I have researched you. And if we are at the red carpet, we are both sharing in this amazing moment, because this is a culmination of the things that you have accomplished, especially if it's if it's an award show.
Mm-hmm.
The premiere is different, but that award show, that Oscar nomination, that Golden Globe nomination, that NAACP Image Awards nomination, that ABFF honors nomination, all that, like, oh, wow, like I'm with you. I see you. How does it feel? So all that connectivity is really important for me. Wow. When I'm interviewing in any capacity, be it a press junket or from the red carpet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I had one question, but you said something that really jumped out. The gotcha. I firmly believe that if you're interviewing someone, it should be a safe space. And I don't like gotcha questions. I don't like that.
Yeah.
What advice would you give anyone that's coming into this industry and they're trying to make an impression, and for some strange or odd reason they start off with those types of bad habits where they're trying to be salacious, and they catch someone with a gotcha question. What would you say to someone that's looking to jump into this and that's the way they're starting off?
A lot of people start off like that, and people have major careers. Their whole careers is that. Wendy Williams, that's how she started. That was her whole career, her whole entire career. Um, the Shade Room. I mean, that's a big audience. People love pain. People love to see somebody else's program just, falling apart and unraveling. My biggest thing is, if you can sleep at night, you have to be able to sleep at night. That's all I say. If you can sleep at night during that sort of story, watching your back, when you're just out having dinner with your kids or your mama, somebody sees you and you drag them for filth on social media. You drag them for filth in a blog spot. If you can live like that, then, do the thing. Something is wrong with my computer. I am so sorry. We probably have about 5 more minutes, Floyd.
Okay, well, I'm going to. Oh, we had so many more questions. Well,
I
you know
am
what?
so
Since
sorry.
no, that is so fine. So you know what I'm going to do,
Here's
because
the
you're definitely
problem.
going to come back.
Yeah, I will come back again. My computer fell and the port is broken
Oh
where I'm
boy.
trying to charge. Yeah.
So some of these questions, because you know what, 90% of the questions that I had for you, because we talked about so many other things. So the one thing that I did want to ask you about are the interviews that you did with Jamie Lee Curtis and Devine Grant, because they were both very powerful interviews and they weren't that long.
Jamie Lee
But
Curtis, who?
the Jamie Lee Curtis interview at the
Okay.
Oscars, and Devine Grant,
Oh, yeah.
when Jamie Lee Curtis talked about degendering
Yeah.
the categories, that was a very powerful moment. And then
Yeah.
when Devine talked about
Divine Joy Randolph.
oh, Divine, oh wow, I have that written
Yeah.
down here wrong. But when she talked about our superpower, never too little, always just enough. That was very
Yep.
powerful for me. So can you talk about those two moments?
Those two moments are very prolific and powerful in my career. A lot of people undercut the value of being in the media room. But it all matters. There's equity there. There's a lot of storytelling real estate there. When the moderator, Jamie Lee Curtis, was the first, I think she was the first win. So what happens when you're doing the media room? You check in, you do all this stuff on the red carpet. If you are not placed, if you do not have an assignment on the red carpet, you have an assignment in the media room. So you get to take all your pictures on the red carpet, and then you go to the media room. You check in, you look on the board, there's a seat for you, you get your paddle, say your paddle number is 262, right? So what's important for me as a journalist, as an African-American journalist that covers primarily for a lot of Black-owned publications, it's important for me to watch everything. I watch everything. So don't think because I'm a Black journalist for a Black publication that I've only watched Black titles. No, I've watched as much as I could stand, as much as my eyes can hold, and so I watched everything everywhere all at once. And Jamie was amazing in that. And so when she came into the media room, my paddle went up immediately. I was the first one that they called. My question opened the floor. It got picked up, of course, by the other outlets that are there: Variety, Entertainment Tonight, Access Hollywood, The Hollywood Reporter, the full gamut. That's why the media room is important, because that is how you really start to stake, your claim and your flag, as a thought leader and as a respectable journalist in the Hollywood space. And so Jamie being able to, first of all, I'd already interviewed her earlier in that award season at another activation, where she said, don't fuck with your face. Don't do the cosmetic. We all age. You're just going to look like an old person with face work. So she was familiar, because sometimes the glare of the media room at the Oscars, you really can't see, but she heard my voice and I could tell it was familiar to her. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be good. And she thought about what she was going to say and she answered it. And it was a viral moment. It was amazing. And Divide Joy Randolph, I started following her career back in 2020. She's from Philadelphia. I'm like, okay, she's another one where I'm like, okay, I'm happy to share in this moment with you. Like, I was on the red carpet with you at the Independent Spirit Awards. I was on the red carpet with you at the Critics' Choice Celebration of Black Cinema. And now here we are. We're face to face. You're there, I'm here, and we're backstage at the Academy Awards. And this is a moment for both of us. And how can you encourage, young men and women from blighted cities like myself, Chester, outside of Philadelphia, to hold space and take up space in the creative arts, and she's, like she said, it's always in the small, start with where you are and just always know that you are enough, and so the media room matters. And I'm so grateful to the team at the Academy for having me for almost a decade, like clockwork. Yeah.
Wow. So last question, because I don't want your computer to cut off. What are 5 things you would tell your younger self, or any young woman or man for that matter, that decided that entertainment journalism is the road for them?
I would say, be patient, right? Be patient. Like, your time is definitely coming. Make sure you're doing the work. Like, that is most critical. Again, read, write, watch. Make sure you're reading every day. Make sure you're watching every day. Make sure you're writing every day. Like, all that, like, be prepared. The third thing is expand the yes. When you get that yes, expand it. And you expand it by taking advantage of it. When someone says yes to you, you're like, okay, let me show up and let me be as excellent as I possibly can. Right?
Oh no. Oh boy. I think we lost her. I think we lost her, folks. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we lost the connection with the amazing Tanisha Laverne Grant. She was in the middle of giving her 5 tips. So we're going to wait a minute or so to see if she can come back. But if she cannot come back, we will be bringing her back onto the podcast for part 2. So we may have to get to 3 through 5. Yes, we will get to 3 through 5 when we have her come back on the podcast. But again, as always, thank you guys so much for joining myself and the amazing Tanisha Laverne Grant on A Conversation With. And as always, love it like a hobby, treat it like a business. I will see you soon. Make sure that you come back for part 2 of my amazing conversation with Miss Tanisha Laverne Grant. Peace.